On this episode, what is the fears that kind of surround 1984?
1984 talks about governmental control and using technology to do so, where they're listening to everything you're saying.
Once you get to a Type 2, certainly a Type 3 civilization, not only is there no more cash, there's really no more currency.
Too many people have gotten too much knowledge, and they just can't control it all. I mean, it's just getting out of control.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Raise your glass to mystery. This is Cocktails and Conspiracies. Yes, you heard that right. This is still Cocktails and Conspiracies. That's Cocktails and Conspiracies. Cocktails and Conspiracies. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with my esteemed co-host, the co-host of Cocktails and Conspiracies, the classic Mr. Phillips. Again,
You know what?
Cocktails and Conspiracies, host and co-host. Cocktails.
I have a
and
cocktail right here.
Conspiracies. Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Imagine that,
Since
drinking a cocktail on cocktails.
certain platform doesn't like the word cocktails anymore, and conspiracies. We're welcoming back one of our favorite guests and pretty much our, I guess, complimentary or by default kind of third co-host here, Mr. Todd Feehan, the blue shirt guy. Not wearing a blue shirt tonight, though. How are you doing, Todd?
Doing well. How are you?
Some kind of wonderful. We're coming hot off the heels here, if you couldn't tell from the intro, of getting a bunch of I'm going to call it spam mail, but honestly just support back and forth with our friends over at Google YouTube, telling us that we have to remove the word cocktails in order for this to not be a limited account, which means we just get a little shorter reach here. And I thought that's kind of an interesting segue into, Todd, what you had brought up in a nice group chat we have talking about conspiracies, about kind of this tech tyranny that is evolving in our world and the future of kind of hitting what was maybe predicted in the past with 1984.
Or at least the book 1984, yeah.
The book 1984, yes, not the actual year. Been a while since we've had you on here, Todd. What's been happening?
Oh, not too much. Just much like everybody else, just keep an eye on the world around us and seeing how much is going on. But on the flip side, how much goes unnoticed, I guess, is another interesting part, because it's like it seems like everybody is. Well, much like sports, everybody's in an uproar over this game, that game, and then the next, within just weeks after the season's end, instantly nobody's talking about it no more. And so, but in the news the other day, which kind of inspired our conversation the other day when we started talking about this, is I think they were talking about Elon and something he's going to do technology wise and stuff, and I just thought it'd be interesting for us to have a really good conversation, and I'm glad you thought it'd be a good idea too, about to talk about the things that nobody talks about, and which is as happens to be one of the things I love to do, is talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah. I'm obviously a big fan of anything technology wise. When I was texting with Tim earlier and saying, we're still on for tonight and recording, he's like, all right, what are we talking about tonight? I'm like, was it Technocracy? Technocracy? What's that word?
Technocracy, yeah.
Technocracy?
Something like that.
He's like, what the fuck does that mean? He's like, clearly something I'll know a lot about here. So nevertheless, here we are. If you're watching live right now on X or on YouTube, for whatever reason, Riverside has the old name that we streamed on, the Vatican Archives. So I apologize, you're not here for that episode. You can go ahead and find that in our previous episodes. But tonight, we're talking about technology. We're talking about how it's controlling the world, how things are changing, and kind of what the world looks like in the future. See, I'm a big fan of this. And I understand the pros and the cons, right? Particularly the cons and why there's a lot of fear. But as I see the evolution of something like artificial intelligence, which I've said on this show many times, and if you follow my business Twitter account, I talk about it all the time as well, that we don't have artificial intelligence right now. What we have is machine learning. It's regurgitating information. We haven't quite hit that yet. But I like the concept of those things because I guess I've started to call myself a bit of a futurist over the past couple of years. Not that I'm sitting on a stage, lecturing out to people in so much as I'm interested in the idea of kind of rapidly advancing technology to then subsequently extend the human life. And Ray Kurzweil had said a couple of years ago that he thinks that his generation, which is, I guess, really a generation above us, will be the last to die. And that our generation, presumably, will be the first to live forever. And he suspects that will be here by about 2050, maybe 2060 at the latest. And that's when humans are really going to merge in with robotics. So we'd basically become cyborgs. And if you look at sort of the healthcare industry now, we're already seeing that sort of manifest a little bit. That's, you can get artificial limbs all the time. You're seeing people that have been amputated now get devices that are bolting onto their body and allowing them to walk or to use their hands, not like the old versions where it was very clunky, but really to have a lot of like dexterity in the fingertips and almost send like neurological signals back so they can have a sensation of feeling, not the same, but similar. Neuralink with Elon Musk, which is empowering people who are paraplegic to be able to control computers and play video games. And obviously the next step is going to be trying to give them back mobility or give vision back to blind people. So, and they're not the only company. There's plenty of others that we just don't hear about that aren't, don't have a super famous owner. The idea of these cyborg humans is very real, right? And I'm going to step back and give us a visual. It's like it's arm's length away right now.
Well,
And
keep
so
in mind, and I don't know how far it's advanced. I seen a video short the other day about how some company has now done like how they lab grow an ear or whatever. What they did is they lab grew a brain, not a human brain. It was a small one, and they started hooking things up to it and started training it things. You know what I mean? So, are we far from that? No, but AI doesn't really necessarily scare me all by itself. Now, in conjunction to something that might be able to process, because I don't know how that would work, hooking up to a human brain. If you were successful about that, then you might have some reason to worry. But that's kind of the whole thing. And one of these days, as you know, I don't know if I told you about this. I'm kind of writing a book. One day I'll finish the damn thing. But all this technology, but when you bundle it all up, the direction we're going is we're going to if you're familiar with the term, the Kardashev level 1 planet. You know what I mean? Which has to do with energy usage and stuff like that. And we might breach the edges of it. One way or another, I think we're going to breach the edges of it. The question is when that period occurs. I think something that has not been addressed is the human race will come to the forefront, the door of what is called the Great Filter. And that great filter is what literally determines whether or not we destroy ourselves or whether we actually move forward. Because whether it's complicated, and we might go into it a little bit later, but the key part is our intelligence level reaching the levels of insanity and still with our animal instincts of greed, this and that. It's like giving a monkey an AK-47 and let him loose, and the question is will through our inequities, will we use technology to kill ourselves, or will we mature and go forth and into the universe and stuff like that, which I think is kind of cool. I'm a sci-fi fan. It is kind of like Star Wars, or not Star Wars, but Star Trek, when they say we're the prime directive. You're not allowed to mess with alien lives that are still developing. You know what I mean? Because realistically, and that's why I kind of halfway don't think that not that it's not possible. It's just it's not. If you have a peaceful species, they would know better than to mess with us, because if for any reason their technology fell into our hands and we gained access to the universe, we would also introduce into the universe all of our inabilities to resolve conflicts. We would bring war. We would bring all the things that we currently have yet to supersede, if that makes any sense. And I think that's why the great filter in the natural world, the natural law, I think that's why it exists and why we're so far away from everything else. Not that we can't get there, but it's complicated. But I think it's within the writings of the nature of things, if that makes sense.
I want to jump back because you said the Kardashev scale, and I think that's important context for people listening to understand what that is. Mr. Phillips, you and I listen to a lot of the same content here. Are you familiar with the Kardashev scale?
You know, it's something I heard a very long time ago. I could certainly use a refresher on it.
So effectively, I'll give you the dictionary definition here. Theoretical framework proposed by a Soviet astronomer, can't speak tonight, Nikolai Kardashev in 1964 to classify civilizations based on their energy consumption and technological advancement. When Todd says that we are pre-type 1, there's 3 types. Type 1, 2, 3, obviously. Type 1 is a civilization that's capable of harnessing and utilizing all the available resources on their planet. Some might argue that we're kind of there, right? Because that's what we're doing right now. But there's still more to tap. Type 2 becomes the civilization that can harness and control the energy output of its star, using like something like a Dyson sphere or a swarm, and that would really be our sun. And then type 3 is one that would command the energy resources of an entire galaxy, kind of energy on a cosmic scale. I don't know that there's any civilization that's going to be type 3, or we probably have an indication of it, unless it's, kind of what we were talking about in our chat earlier, more of a godlike civilization or species. But certainly type 2 would need to be acquired for us to become interstellar. And so going back to kind of the type 1 where he exists today, I think we're on the precipice of that, right? Like we've exhausted a lot of resources with natural resources, whether it's, oil coming from the ground, we've done hydrogen, we've done oxygen. We can get energy from just about anywhere.
Yeah, and the only way we're ever going to get there, oddly enough, is through a technocracy, which is a double-edged sword. And it's like, 'cause keep in mind, whether it's a gun, a knife, a pen, it has just as much capability of doing bad as it does good, and that's where everything gets. That's why we're talking about 1984.
I think everyone knows the answer to this question, but I'm going to toss it out to you anyway, just to softball it out to the audience. What is, in a quick summary, what is 1984? What is the story? What is the book? What is the fears that kind of surround 1984?
Well, oddly enough, I think it's a lot of what we're experiencing today. 1984 talks about governmental control and using technology to do so, where they're listening to everything you're saying, penalizing you for not following the narrative that you're supposed to promote. And just in a nutshell, if we're just going to numb it all down, is you lose all your personal freedom and free will. That you're a number, you're not a name, and the reality is you're a slave. You're a slave to the powers to be, and only them that are at the top have freedom and free will, and they dictate everything, whether it's morally right or wrong.
So you know what's funny about that? So not that I'm sure we want to dissect this in a much deeper way, but when I think of 1984, you know what I think of? I think of my Google Home devices all over my house, right? And what's funny is that when those first came out, and when I first got, because I have one in literally just about every single room in my house, and there were people voicing concerns about, hey, if that could just listen to you, right? Like at any given moment, I mean, like at all times, like, aren't you concerned? And I'm like, my thought was always, I don't give a fuck. I have nothing to hide. But this was pre-2020, and we all know what happened in 2020, right? Whether it be something in the government or something in our bodies. There were a lot of things that occurred since then. And I kind of woke up after that and I was like, oh shit, that's kind of bad news bears, man. And every time I think of 1984, I look at my Google and I go, what the fuck are you thinking about over there, man?
That's a great point, Tim. And I'd like to bounce something back to you real quick. I understand a lot of people. At one point, there was a period in my philosophical thinking. I have nothing to hide either. But what's the worst you think that could happen with the government for someone who's not doing anything wrong? Do you think anything bad can happen out of it? And that's a trick question, because you know what I'm going to say. But Think about it. I mean,
Yeah, well, look, I think that if the current administration wasn't the current administration and had someone else won, I think we'd be potentially in a much different space right now. Look what's happening in Britain. People are getting locked up all over the place for posting things on Facebook. And so if they could lock you up for posting things on Facebook, I mean, my goodness, what was it? The Patriot Act that was passed in 2001. I mean, they have the ability to spy on you whenever they want. So what's to stop them from coming and locking you up because of something they heard you say on your Google Home device?
and thank you. That's kind of the response I would expect from most people, and it's not the greatest danger. That's the part that's important to understand here is that's not the greatest danger. Because keep in mind, let's take three things here real quick. The internet was created by the military. It by its initial design has always been a weapon, which ironically is the only weapon that's been ever given directly to the public for free, gain access, and so as you look at the people being arrested, the greater portion is not the well, you can be arrested. Don't get me wrong; it's a major inconvenience. It causes drama and stuff. The problem is when you think about it. Back when Barack Obama was in office, they started cutting it off where certain nations, as you know, countries couldn't access information in other countries. To some level, we can talk still, but that's usually through social media platforms. The danger, the highest level of danger, is for them to control the story. It doesn't matter that we say the wrong things,
Sure.
as long as you only hear the truth that they want to hear. And that's where the greater danger exists. And we already know we're there. We're there with AI. We're there with CNN and these media outlets. And that's what the internet was. It was an expansion of those media markets because keep in mind, going back 20, 30 years ago, there were still independent journalists and breaking stories and this and that. And the internet operates as a perfect tool to put it all under one house, checked instantly. It's a beautiful mechanism, you know, for doing just that. And it also gives people a false sense of security because, well, it's just a computer. The computer's not doing that, but there's always a man behind the machine. And I think too easily we forget about that. So the danger, the greatest danger, is just the power of the internet about pushing certain storylines, narratives, truths, this or that. Because and my example of that, and this goes to both of you, I know there's a lot of controversy over the transgenderism and stuff like that. And my point isn't about whether we agree with it or not. My point is would it have ever reached the scale it is today as far as on so many people's minds, lips, this and that, if the internet didn't exist?
I want to add though too, or maybe I guess position a question back to you is the greatest danger certainly is that, but is that not also the greatest strength? Because although that issue on the gender identity front is one of them, you've also got the other side of it too, where people are now able to collectively communicate with one another and kind of stomp out a lot of that bad information that comes out there. Yes, it's being controlled, but if you think back to like, and we're old enough to remember this, but like really the early internet days and to a degree, even the pre-internet days, if you were getting information from somewhere, it generally wasn't from an AOL chat room, right? Like maybe you get bits and pieces here. It was always going to be from a media outlet, a news outlet. And so, you know, your parents always talk, they got it from word of mouth because they read it in the newspaper and they read it once a day. Well, as that's evolved, right, and we've seen these media conglomerates kind of get chewed up and swallowed into a single company, and now there's what, three of them out there. It's eliminated that possibility, and so without the internet out there, those outlets, which we've seen in plenty of viral videos, can produce the exact same message everywhere in a state, everywhere in a country, and potentially sometimes even everywhere in the world. On the flip side of that is, although that's still happening on the internet, and people are kind of becoming activists or slacktivists, even if you will, for issues that are so absurd that probably would have never taken stake. I think that's just collateral damage, so to speak, to the other people that are kind of rallying up and saying like, you know, we got to stop. We got to look into X, Y, and Z. Speaking of back what Tim was talking about 2020 as well too, which we know are banned words, but that wave to stop that doesn't happen without people being able to communicate, not locally, because people locally wouldn't dare speak of it because they didn't know what to think, right? And you didn't know where to get information from. But you had doctors and scientists coming out and putting their careers on the line that you would have never found out about had it not been for that. So is it always that double-edged sword? Is there always good with the bad? And where's the line that you're willing to draw for that?
Well, I think that's where the technocracy comes in. It's if it's not controlled by the public and the public's will, and keep in mind the public isn't always right about many things. But it's just that because as we look at the internet as it is today, as many advancements as we've made, we've gotten just as many disadvantages created as well. Because as you know, it's like everything we do goes through the www dot. You know what I mean? They can create an internet that doesn't begin with www dot, but they don't, and everything, and that allows them that one highway to check everything. And keep in mind, it's not being checked. It's not. I think a lot of times there's good that people get paid to do. You know, there's people out there trying to catch criminals and this and that. Those things do have good things, but keep in mind they also at the same time, because it's not as open and publicly controlled, everybody is forced to go through Amazon or this or that to do all their purchases, and it's promoted the monopolization of field after field after field after field. And that's not good in the long run, because giving any group that much power in a world where technology is a mediator between people, that's not a safe thing. I mean, if we continue to allow the internet to be so overwhelming in our lives, like some of the experiments already going on, like Amazon, where a computer system fires you. I mean, it's like that prevents you from going to your boss and saying what, or being written up. It's like there's no natural feedback. It could be blamed off to, well, it was a computer glitch. We're sorry. If they're really found in the wrong, I mean, it's too much, too many ways to make it not look like their fault when you're talking to these big giants in corporations. And it's like, it has to be people driven, and people controlled. Take a step back. It's like, so what do you do? I mean, people are like, well, we need the government for that. And some people are like, we don't need the government for that. Try to think of it like this. To do it right, you need someone that is a group or whatever that's willing to provide sound peace of mind and saying, look, if you're going to, like a parent, literally, it's like, I understand, son, that you want to go do this, but X, Y, Z are the repercussions. If you're going to do it, this is what you got to watch, because this is where your problems come in. But at the end of the day, you got to make your own choices. And that is, to me, more of the ideological answer, because at least if you make mistakes or those mistakes happen, as a public, we at least keep it open in our open mind. We made that decision. You know what I mean? The moment you take away the people, then instantly it's his fault it didn't work, and it doesn't matter whether people contributed properly. And if the people make all the decisions, they're likely to make some irrational ones, because people can become irrational. It's not a one or the other. We got to find a medium, and within that medium, you find the balance. And we don't really have anything like that, because again, that's also why we have two political sides. And even though the answer is try to lean in the middle as much as possible, the left and the right will tell you, if you're not right, you're not right. If you're left, you're not right. It's like, even though, and you can look this up on the internet, the greater portion of voters, 60+% identify as independent, and they're forced to vote in a left or a right, when the fact is they're neither. They're literally trying to choose what is better, because no candidate exists within theirs, and that's without the technocracy. That's the system the way it is now. So I'll digress and let you move on, but or give some feedback on that. But it's like, it's a tricky question, but the answer is, it resides in doing something that we have been doing that's been an absolute failure for the last several thousand years. It's clearly this doesn't work in that we need to find a new avenue. We need to be willing to take that road.
Sure. Tim, I want to throw this to you, this question. Do you think that we'll call it big tech because we got big farm, we got big everything else, but big tech. Do you think that these iterative inventions or technology advancements, do you think that it's done with malicious intent, or is it just sort of a byproduct of growing technology?
I think it's probably more of a byproduct, right? And I think that, I remember learning about Thoreau probably, I don't know, whatever grade I was, right? And him being so against the Industrial Revolution, and I just thought to myself, like, what a fucking moron. Like, you want to live in the woods and fucking chop trees with your hand and milk cows, and, like, that's what you want to do? Granted, I was a child, and so I have a bit of a different perspective now. But learning about Thoreau and granted, I was probably in maybe 5th grade, right? I'm almost 40 years old. So the fact that I still remember that, right, it sticks with me for a reason. And I think about that often because I think about the question that you just asked, right? Technology, where it is today, where it's going. Is it malicious? Is it a byproduct? And I think it likely is a byproduct, right? And look, I want to be very clear. Like, I think we live in the greatest time that you could ever possibly live. I think we live in the greatest country you could ever live in. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I wouldn't ever want to live in another single time, right? You want to go back 100 years, your life's going to be really fucking hard. Let me tell you that, baby. You're against all this shit, you want to go back to the days without technology, your life is going to be very fucking difficult. We have it very, very easy, and my ass don't want to go back. Having said that, there's always bad actors. We talk about it all the time on here, right? I mean, pick the topic, we could talk about the bad actors. And so there's always going to be bad actors that are going to utilize things, whatever it might be, for their own greed, for their own ambitions, to line their own pockets, to build power. And I think that most, not all, most of it is done with good intentions. But you have those bad actors. What's that old saying, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
and that's kind of where I'm going to kind of pivot back to you a little bit there, Todd, is Tim talks about bad actors. I think we're going to start to see more technology start to roll out, whether it's going to be digital IDs, they're coming. I mean, Real ID is the first step towards that. Smart cities, they're coming too. And on paper, it's a brilliant idea. And honestly, something that I've thought myself of as early as like the WeWork days. I can't think of his name, Adam something, created WeWork, but he also had a spin-off idea that before he was ousted from WeWork, he wanted to create these We communities, We Live or something like that, which he ended up doing after Adam Newman, that's his name. He ended up doing this afterwards, after he's ousted from WeWork. He tried to do it, but he couldn't get any money at that point because he collapsed WeWork. But the concept was to create a very similar shared space as WeWork, where people would just have rooms, and it would be shared commons, shared kitchens, gardens within the building, all the shops. So you, as a young person that probably doesn't have a whole lot of money, can go in, you can live in one of these things, these communes, and it'd basically like a dorm room for like mid 20-year-olds that are just kind of getting on their feet, and you never have to leave your concept. So when I hear smart cities, that's what I think. We're also going to start to see like decision making a lot, as you alluded to before, Todd, with jobs and AI judges in a way. But I think that also comes with the replacement of a lot of menial jobs. Of those, there are going to be bad actors across the way. Which instills the most fear to you, and which do you think is sort of the tipping point for us, if done incorrectly or maliciously, catapults us towards 1984?
I think we're already there. It's just a matter of...
You think we're there today?
Yeah, you were already there today.
Okay.
It's just putting on the following touches, because keep in mind, I think the 1984 is just an expression of the lead up to the one world government. Because 1984... it's an interesting sci-fi book in concept when it came out, until you start adding, why would somebody... Keep in mind, I'm a philosopher. I love the who, what, why, where, when, all those things. You know what I mean? And one of the things that that book never really reached into is, why is this important? And the elephant in the room, I think, in the back was just that. It's the one world government. And that one world government, it ties it back to like an earlier conversation that we've talked about, will lead to a world war, because at the end of the day, who gets to control that one world government? Is it China? Is it the United States? Because keep in mind, once you have that control, it's just like Texas Hold'em. Once you've got control of the table, there's no reason to stop. And that's the kind of people we elect, even most of the time, to run our governments. And that's to answer your question, that's the danger. I mean, that's the true utter danger, because once they release the dragon, so to speak, whether it's war or however they want to fight, there's no limit, because at the end, if keep in mind, the most dangerous person is the person that's been pushed in a corner and has no out. They're willing to go beyond all means. It's like think about it like this. It's kind of like the murder suicide that you see on the news. The last thing you want is a global leader doing a murder suicide with other nations. That's the danger that goes with it, which is why we talk about nuclear war. I've went back and forth with a friend on this. He's ex-military, and they're like, no, we have to have the bigger gun because that's what keeps our enemies docile. And it's like, I understand that theology, but it only takes one crazy guy to say, fuck it. You know what I mean? It's like, we as a planet should not have those things anywhere, period. We should not ever have weapons of mass destruction, nor should we ever let our or any other government build them, period. I don't to sit there and take a blind eye to it and say, well, that's just the way it is. That is negligent on, in my opinion, it's just about as negligent as we can be as a species. It's like, because it's a game ender. I mean, those things are game enders.
There's a term, I'm not sure if I can look it up real quick, for basically when hackers can come in and take over an entire city infrastructure. It's like a fire or something. I don't want to say fire sale, but in any case, kind of building off of your point about, WMDs even, one of the interesting things that I've always kind of sat in the back of my mind is what happens when everything becomes interconnected, right? We are on the precipice of quantum computing, which we've talked about in other episodes here. Todd and I, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and the idea of just kind of expanding memory, and we're there, right? And so, Tim, I forgot which episode. I think it was actually the simulation theory episode where we're talking about how Google is literally, I mean, they've claimed that they've broke it. They're there. When that happens, every bit of security that we have, it's gone. It's broken, because quantum computing theoretically is taking stuff out of our realm. It's calculating every single possible combination of something all at once, right? So now you have to create quantum encryption to protect all of your stuff.
And even then, that's still not going to safeguard things. Let me tell you something we've never talked about. There's a guy up in Tulsa, Mike, and don't get me wrong, I don't know that he's the forefront of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but he's been recognized and been to the UN twice. And I was talking to him one day, and you're a tech guy, so you tell me whether you think this is possible. But like I told him, I said, if we were to completely go to a digital currency, which I think is a bad idea, if the answer to this is yes, then I think it's a bad idea to ever fully go to it. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, just fully. Imagine this, okay? Say tomorrow, every country in the world adopts a cryptocurrency, this and that, and we do it under Bitcoin, which is one of the best cryptos, current, as far as locking it in with blockchain and everything. I said that, which requires these miners. I said, tell me this. I said, is it not easier and potentially cheaper? Because I think the largest one is Bitcoin. I said at the time being, I don't know if it's increased since then, which I imagine it's a little bit. I said there's 1,500 miners around the world that nobody knows their locations, but they're the ones creating that blockchain and verifying transfers, this and that. And he said yes. And I said, isn't it not easier to try to find those 1,500 people and send your military and gain access to their computers at point of use? Because the 1,500 people is a lot easier than 60,000 soldiers. And at that point, you could lock up an entire nation's money. You could steal it. You could do whatever the hell you wanted to. which I think the worst part would be locking it up, because if everybody had to use this thing and you locked it up where everybody had no access to their money, that would create pure chaos. And he's told me, I've never thought about that, but yes, he goes, when you look at it from that angle, it's far easier to. He goes, first you'd have to find them, and I'm like, I get that, but we're in a living age where people are pretty crafty, and it's easier to find 1,500 people to upset that entire system. So, throwing it back at you, Shane, how likelihood is that from what I'm talking about?
It's probably not as cut and dry as you think. When you're saying miners, my inclination is you're talking about the people that are trying to find Bitcoin, and that is significantly more than 1,500, right? You and I can become a Bitcoin miner right now today. All you're doing with Bitcoin, and
Yeah, I might be using the wrong term. The guy that creates the blockchain and that's validating the algorithms, those people.
that doesn't exist, right? Because that's all open source. Not even open source. That's all decentralized. That's the idea of the blockchain, is there actually is nobody out there that's doing that. And the person, we covered this in an episode actually pretty recently, Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin apparently solo, is gone. They're off. And our theory is that it could potentially be Jack Dorsey who created Twitter, because a lot of the dates lined up. In any case, yes, if there are big rigs that are predominantly the ones mining for it, yes, going after them makes a lot of sense. A couple things here, though. The idea of an algorithm, right? Like if you break quantum computing, Bitcoin's done, because all it is it's figuring out an algorithm. It's figuring out a math problem that we don't have the compute power to do, which is why it takes so much energy right now. The second angle of that is, I'm going to kind of pivot this question back. And Tim, how much cash do you have on you right now?
Like not on a card.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
in, like,
physical
actual
cash. How much
cash?
cash are you holding right now?
Big
Yep.
fat
Kind of my
zero,
whole
my
point.
friend. Big fat zero.
Big fat zero. And
I don't even have
a couple
$1
bucks
bill
on me.
in my wallet. Not even a $1 bill.
I happen to have a couple more of that. Like, I might have like $100 in cash on me now, because we were out this weekend and we had some extra cash out. But generally, mine is like, if I have $3 or $4 on me total, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Are we not in digital currency already? I mean, do we need to be moving to a cryptocurrency? We already have all of our money that we own is in a bank, right? It doesn't take much for that, and you see this all the time, where big institutional banks get hacked, and of course you have the FDIC that can protect it, but they only protect it a certain amount. But if you were to walk into a bank and withdraw all of your money from there, and I'm not even talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you were to walk in there and ask them to take out $10,000 on the spot, they could not give that to you. Could not. Why is that? Because the money doesn't exist. And so,
Well, they don't need to keep it on hand anymore. But I think that, like I said, I'm not saying that we should never do electronic currency. My thought is you should never do away with physical currency. I think a portion of what is out there in ether. So if the whole world had $20 trillion, then for just throwing a number, at least 10% of that needs to maintain in actual physical form at all times in the event of an issue. You know what I mean? Because again, whether it's the hacking of a crypto bank or something like that, once assets are frozen, and it's not, because assets just don't get frozen for a whole bank. You know what I mean? There needs to be a way to get that out on a quick level, and again, that's just, to me, it's negligence if you're not trying to maintain at least for a safety guard. Because my point is, you keep a spare in the car. Do you need all 5 tires? No, you don't ever need that 5th tire, but you keep it there in case one goes flat. It's just, and again, that over safety, that over reliance on technology can fix everything. And it's like, keep in mind, when your power goes off, that space heater that runs off of just gas, I'll tell you what, it'll keep your ass from freezing in the winter.
unless
you know what I mean?
the power goes off in the natural gas company too. With money, though, you said stay away from it, and I get that, and I echo that a lot too. You want to still have some currency. They've already stopped making pennies. There was a period coming out of that 2020 period where, a lot of places won't take cash anymore. And you can see that now. Like if you go to arcades,
There's places like that already.
There's lots of places
Go to
that
a concert
no longer
venue
accept
or a sporting
cash.
event.
Right. Concert venue, sporting event, perfect example, Tim. And then you look at banks themselves, is now there's limits on the amount of cash you can take out. at a given month, or you get fees on your account. There's limits to the amount of cash you can put in to your bank account. Like if I deposit too much cash, and this has happened to my wife when she bartended, she would get all cash, right? And then she'd go to deposit it, and they would actually tell her, like, you can't deposit this amount of cash. Like, what are you talking about? What am I supposed to do with it? Break it up into deposits? What's the difference? But then they start limiting you, so you can only do certain months. Like, and that's what you're starting to see roll out. And so I think we are on a fast track to cash disappearing. We will be a cashless society before the end of our lives, the three of us sitting here, assuming we don't hit that that point where we live forever. But well, I guess at that point it will be by the end of our lives. We won't have cash.
Right.
But I think in the next 30 to 40 years, I think that cash is gone.
You know what I think?
Go ahead, Tim.
I was to expand on that even further and kind of to tie back to the types of civilizations. I think eventually, and granted, there's obviously no guarantee this is ever going to occur, but once you get to a Type 2, certainly a Type 3 civilization, not only is there no more cash, there's really no more currency because there's really not a need for it. And that's the crazier thought, right?
That's the end result that we want, and realistically, I don't think what you're saying is unrealistic. It's just a matter of getting to that point. And not to just capture the conversation for a second, because I think it's important to kind of stray this in the right direction. The reason that this is all important with the internet and everything, because what we're physically dealing with, it's an age old deal. It's not what we're talking about is not new. We're talking about a digital Silk Road. When you control that, you control everything else. That's why this thing is so damn important. And that's why it's so powerful, because that's what it is. And in order to move forward in that technocracy that we're talking about, it needs to be able to give people the freedoms to create products that they want to create and get them to people that want to buy them without going through monopolies. And that's why this is so important. And there's the other part. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's other factors that need to go definitely with it, like education. I mean, education never can be improved far greater than any other generation before us. And yet here we are, we're arguing about some of the dumbest things, and we're not trying to make our children and grandchildren's tomorrow better by simply fixing the education system once and for all. The utilization of technology for education, as you and I talked to, Shane, on some similar ideas that I tried to work in the past. The digital education, if done properly, has been proven. It's already been proven to increase learning speeds 1,300%. I mean, that's the equivalent. That's the equivalent of a second grader graduating high school if everything's laid out correctly. You know what I mean? And moving into a technological era where we're going to have to go to the stars and the moon and start mining Mars or whatever. We might need fifth graders doing trigonometry. We might need fifth graders doing quantum physics. You know what I mean? And it's there, but we're still playing this petty game of keep people poor because we still need people for the military. And that's the whole point of why people are poor. You need military.
And so I guess that kind of brings up an interesting point too, right? We talked a little bit earlier. I actually posed the question to you, Tim, is do you think there's malicious intent behind big tech? And when you look at things like education, when you look at things like technology is often stifled in the interest of profit. And I think that if big government was behind, or I guess more of a black government was behind big tech, I don't think you'd see that stifled as much for a couple reasons. You want technology to improve rapidly if your ultimate goal is that one world government. Because right now, like you alluded to, education, alpha schools are opening up businesses with second graders right now. These aren't like facetious businesses. These are legal entities in the United States that are being opened up and selling product. They're teaching second graders how to do that. And they're doing that in a 3-hour day. Because they're learning at such a rapid pace, to your point, Todd. But you start to see these types of things. You want to front load people because you want to get them off the work line, right? It's significantly more profitable. And we're going to start to see this roll out. And two is to use an AI agent or to use a computer or a machine to do a lot of these work where you don't have to deal with people working only an 8-hour shift and complaining and needing time off. And when you start to replace them, if you allow them to leverage their brains more, and you start teaching people at an early age and you start lifting patents and all of this patent warfare that goes on. I always use the example: Apple sued Samsung for big money. Apple's a scumbag company. I hate Apple, and I'm gonna even mark this so this can go out there. There's so many scumbag things they've done, from suing Microsoft for a monopoly to do the exact same thing that they sued Microsoft for by just only loading their own apps in there, to then suing Samsung for a patent they had on how to open a link in a text message so it opens it up in a browser. Believe it or not, that was patented. So they, of course, they settle this lawsuit with Samsung, which just slows them down. All Samsung has to do is change the programming slightly. So the link still opens up in a browser, but it just does it a different way that's maybe not as smoothly. A complete waste of years and a complete waste of technology. That's when you saw companies like Microsoft start coming out, and even Elon Musk, when he took his self-driving technology and his electric charging technology, he printed it all out into huge binders and he sent it to every car company in America and said, here you go, here's the technology that you haven't been able to do in the history of your companies. When you eliminate that patent law that these stupid companies are fighting over, some of them, and you allow this technology to grow at a rapid pace, then you get closer to the adaptation of all of this technology. We're seeing it now. Tim, a self-admitted non-tech guy, you said you have Google Homes in every single room of your house. You're starting to use ChatGPT all the time. You're like, these are things that a couple years ago,
I don't even use Google anymore.
right? And most people don't. And I think we're going to start to see that start to kind of snowball quite a bit. And so that's when I come back to the thought of like, well, who really is calling the shots here? Because if there was somebody at the top that was making those decisions, well, they want this to happen, right? And maybe that's the case now. Maybe they do want this to happen. But leading up to it, up to this point, why wouldn't we have fostered that? Why wouldn't we have pushed ourselves towards that sooner? It would have given, I mean, of course you want that, that slave labor hammering away in the mines, but now that we don't need to do that anymore, well, what are you holding people back? Why are you choking out the education system so bad? Why are you kind of not fostering in all these digital currencies? It's an interesting thought, and I guess is kind of lends itself to what you said there, Todd. It's like we kind of are in 1984 era world right now, the world of ultimate surveillance, the world of all this I still can't say the word. It's like a tongue twister for me. Technocracy. But is that a
Which
bad thing?
coincidentally, Elon Musk's grandfather and a group of people, I don't know if you knew that, they were the first people to try to initiate that, which is interesting because it's like when you start looking at all these grand plans, you talk about the Knights Templar having this 60-year plan, whatever. It's like, was it just chance or were they planning this far ahead? You know what I mean? Because isn't it odd that, in his early 20s, he's selling a company, him and his brother, at like 22 or something, like they sold their companies for $300 million, which if you figure out inflation, it's damn near $1 billion today. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a lot of money, which is interesting to me. It's like, not many people get the full ticket of the value of their stuff, which at that kind of sale, they got full price. And my point is we know tons of other stories where people got burned. So what made him so special that him and his brother were able to sell at full value? Not only just sell it at full value, how did it not end up like half the Disney kids where the parents took the money? Or there's a lot of interesting factors around that he got to where he's at. And it's like, what made him special? Because there's a lot of tragedies all over the world that started out with, I made a lot of money. And it happens, so something, it could be just coincidence. It might be a good fortune, but to me, something just still just doesn't seem right there, especially when Grandpa was at the forefront of it,
Every once in a while, something good's got to break through, right? It can't just be always tragedy. And we kind of talked about this in our whistleblower episodes last week and really the week before is, you have so many people that just kind of like come to the edge and they back off, or they suddenly vanish from planet Earth for one reason or another.
Yeah, I think that's basically what it just needs to be brought out, I think, for the conversation. Because I know I could sound negative and real paranoid, schizophrenic half the time, and it's like that's not and it's not my intention. I'm like, let's use it, like, call it the Nikola Tesla, example.
Sure,
He
sure. And
wanted
he's
to
a
do
great
great
example of
work.
that. He
Yeah,
did it with all the greatest intentions, and all of his competitors, like Edison, wanted to shut it
exactly.
down. Yeah.
Bad actors put their hooks into people like that. They put, you know what I mean? It's not that the person's bad. They always get hooked up with the wrong crowd, and the wrong crap gets built because of it. That's part of the human nature. And that's why it's like it's always such a complicated conversation, because it's like there's all these other side factors. It's not as clear cut as, well, this guy's a bad guy, that guy, and all this other. There's so many factors and so much history that most people don't want to dig into, which I get bored, so I don't mind. And but for an example, and kind of what we're talking about, I was at a, a convention once, and I was talking to a guy from the Department of Energy, and I asked him straight up, and this was just right after the Barack Obama thing and stuff, and where we're starting to lose connection to other countries' websites and this and that. And I asked him, I said, why is it that Volkswagen just released news on and I could have read it wrong, but I could have swore it said 300 miles of the gallon car, a car that got 300 miles a gallon. Now, keep in mind, even if it was 300 kilometers to the mile, that's still 100 miles a gallon. You know what I mean? And I'm like, why is something like that going on, but yet we're not doing anything in the U.S. to try to fund it? I get it, because our roads are paid for by how much gas we got, we buy. I said, but to sit there and to portray that it doesn't exist, it's a bit insulting, especially when you can find the information. And the only reason I knew about it is a guy I knew went to Italy, got a car that was like 80 get miles a gallon or something like that, loved it, tried to come back here, and that's where he got his education. And he started telling me about all these car companies that could do all this stuff. And he said Ford makes one. Ford's got a vehicle that makes like 90 miles of a gallon, and we make it here in the U.S., but it's not for sale here in the U.S. It's shipped across the border into Mexico. And this guy looks at me. He's from the Department of Energy, and he said, "You need to quit reading conspiracy theory." I'm like, the facts are out there. You know what I mean? It's like, and the point being is this: why does this matter? It's multifaceted. They keep us dumb for a reason. They keep us poor for a reason, and because you can control things, and that's the whole thing. Our biggest problem moving forward in the future with this technocracy and technology and all together is it's stifling free will, creative minds, and this and that. And that's not a good mixture, because one of the things that built this great society are the things they're now stifling. And I think they're trying to stifle it because we do have an unusually smart group of kids that that grew up in this era. They're getting information, and I think that from a governmental standpoint, I think it's out of control, and they don't know how to control it, and that's why they're coming down so hard on all these. You can't say this, and then confusing people, because too many people have gotten too much knowledge, and they just can't control it all. I mean, it's just getting out of control. Their control. Sorry.
Well, thank God for X.
Well, X even still has its own, but yes, thank God for X. At least there's an alternative to the one-sided argument that you get if you're watching mainstream media TV.
Yeah, you joke about that, but I don't really think people quite appreciate what happened when Elon purchased X, because it allows us to continue to have conversations like, I mean, again, like we talked about at the top of this episode, I can't use the word cocktail when I write a description for our show that is called Cocktails and Conspiracies, because now it's not blocking our channel, but it's limiting the audience because they're saying we're promoting alcohol consumption,
shadow
which
banning
clearly
us.
was not it. It's shadow bans us, right? And you can see that because like when we boost a promotion, I can show the metrics here. You'll get 100,000 views and all of a sudden like 100,000 impressions and 109 views. The same boost for the same amount of money will get us 4,000 or 5,000. Like it's exponentially different. And so we all saw what happened with Facebook. We all saw what happened with Instagram. I know I was personally affected. We've talked about that ad nauseum on these shows. Those policies have now changed, but they changed because of X. And the community notes feature changed and became a group thing because of X. The verification process changed because of X. They were just verifying people before, and they were doing that with behind the doors type payments. If you knew somebody, you paid them off. Now anybody can get that check mark and plant themselves in the top, and everyone complained about it. But now all the social networks do it. It does it across the board.
Interesting point. Because we're talking about all this enforcement of what you can and cannot do, say, what not say, the ESG, the economic social governance, and the scores and all that stuff. You know where that came from, right? I mean, because I'm not aware of a single human being across any country, a part of the world, where like, you know what, this is what we should have for everybody, not as a group, an individual. You know where that came from? The actual design and order for it came from the. It came from the our leaders over at the UN,
That makes sense.
who also is buying back land and doing all. They're the writers of the ESG and all that stuff. It's like these are not. And keep in mind, for those who do not know, to sit there and be taking orders, even though they call it an NGO, their end group is to be the government of all governments.
Right.
It is in direct conflict with our Constitution. The fact that they're even on our land is a violation to our Constitution. We are not to ever take orders and work together like that. A duality group, you're not supposed to do that. Period. I just like to point that out. It's like, so when you see Biden and all these people doing shit like that, it's like, I wonder where that came from. And then you find out it's the UN. Who does he work for? Does he work for the American people or does he work for the UN? And the answer is he works for the UN. He doesn't work for the American people. And then that's your first initiation. Because keep in mind, you have a president that's acting on a foreign government's interest, which is treason. Because if he's not your president acting in your best minute, and he's literally taking orders from another group, that's treason. But we're not allowed to investigate that.
I'm sure we'll get shadow banned just for those words.
Yeah, Shane will have to cut this, but it'll be good for our conversation.
We don't have a lot of luck with you sometimes, Todd, with our topics here. Sometimes they get blocked off for a couple months at a time. I want to change the context of the conversation a little bit. We're talking a lot about the dystopian aspects here, but there are some benefits to the more autonomous world that kind of comes out of this technology advancement. I have plenty of them because I'm in technology, so I'm not going to give any answers to this myself. But Tim, I want to ask you: do you see any benefit? Is there something that you do today that you think could be easier, or there's something that you've kind of heard about, or you're on the precipice of that you think would be beneficial that maybe you're willing to kind of see that through?
Well, dude, we could talk about the things that are already here. How about the fact that I'm almost 40 years old and I've walked into a bank maybe twice in my entire life, right? That's something that couldn't have occurred 50, 60, 100 years ago. So, like, we don't even have to look forward to the future to talk about things that are all over. Now, granted, you can argue that's a benefit or that it's a pro, or you could argue that it's a con, depending upon the way you feel about currency, and we already had a very long conversation about digital currency, but it's already here, man. Look, nothing's going to stop it. Nothing is going, apart from total annihilation of our planet, nothing's going to stop technological advancement. I think we need to learn to live with it. And realistically, when you think about it too, right? We're like infants when it comes to technology. And when I say technology, I'm talking about the kind of tech that we're talking about today, right? Chips and motherboard, that kind of technology, right? I'm not talking about cars and things like that. But we're still really, think about it. I mean, Shane, you and I grew up, and Todd, I know you as well, right? Like, we all grew up before the internet, before we can do something like this. Now, we're all in 3 separate places, right? We're in different states, and we're able to have a conversation and actually see each other in real time. That would have been batshit fucking crazy 40 years ago to think that we could do that, right?
Yeah.
As just normal people, right? Not setting up a big television, broadcast. And so you're not gonna stop it. There's nothing anybody can do to stop it. It's coming like a fucking wave, and we need to learn to deal with it. And I'm excited for it, honestly. Like, I want it all, dude. I want it all. And look, I'll take the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't care. It could be a little frightening, for sure. But I'm excited for it, man. I want it all, baby.
Sending the same question to you, Todd.
I think that we need to learn to embrace it, but also at the same time acknowledge our responsibilities in this net, because um, in regards to whether it's the great filter or whatever, we're at the point of no return. And so let me like explain that just a little bit. If we had a global cataclysm tomorrow, we don't know enough about old school ways to feed ourselves. We don't know about to get clean water. We rely on tech that much, and we don't teach any of the old ways. And I'm not saying that we should always be embraced into the old ways. Evolution always has to move forward. It always has to. And the reality is I don't think that the human race can effectively take a deep breath and be able to relax until we're a multi-planet species. Because keep in mind, we've only been out of the last ice age for 10,000 years. I mean, whether it's the next ice age, which what if one starts in 300 years? You know what I mean? It would wipe us all out, or potentially, because we wouldn't know how to grow crops into that. What if it's an asteroid? The point is one major out of, without even dealing with what the human race can do to itself. There's all these potential factors, and global factors being the most prevalent, like an ice age or a global drought. You know what I mean? The planet itself goes through these long periods of extended seasons. That if we don't utilize that technology even more on how to survive, just to survive the next ice age, then what the hell is it all for? Because we literally could go from a 80 billion planet to back down to 5,000 people. You know what I mean? And it's like, what was the purpose of learning all this shit to go back to square one? And keep in mind, there's a lot of resources that will never get back getting built up to that point. And that's why I'm saying, like for me, that's why I say we're at the point of no return. It's a shit to get out the pot, and along with that, we need to start kicking egos to the side and a couple other things. And in that book that I'm one day we'll finish. The other key part is in regards to society, we need to acknowledge what created society so we can actually keep it going. And society was created under the concept that everybody participated. And I think the Indians, some of the Indian tribes that did in North America and probably other parts of the world, depict the stories you hear about it depicted great. And when a kid got old enough to be a man, he was thrown out of the tribe. He had to go live in the wilderness for like 60 days or whatever the hell. And at the end of it, if he lived, because he was taught everything he needed to know up to that point, he come back a man, but he also understood the rules of you follow the rules, or we at any point we can throw your ass out, and you can't say it's cruel because we know you can survive. And when we exist in a world with such huge entitlements where people don't think they need to work, and I know it sounds cruel, I'm like, we can have conversation about the people who have true disabilities, but the people who just don't want to contribute. But that's why we have to build education systems and make them accessible to everybody and minimize costs, if not free, whatever. Because the reality is if you're not going to contribute, we've removed all the hurdles, and all you got to do is just pick a damn job. We don't care. Just pick a job, go do something that's needed, or get the fuck out. That is the basics of society, and somehow that message has been lost a very long time ago. It's get a job, do something, or get the fuck out. It's no different than at home. You got that teenager. You're 21, son. Hey, do something or get the fuck out.
Hey, listen, we know plenty of people that are still at home and they're almost 40, so it is what it is sometimes. I think you hit on some points that I really, really, really echo. And the idea of an ice age, to me, even a solar flare, right? If something like that happens, it sets us back. And of course, I think it's important to learn the bushcraft skills. How are you going to go out into the woods? How are you going to survive? Things like that. But honestly, I don't know that that's the most important. For me, it's a race. How fast can we reach the peak of technological advancement? Not because I'm concerned about, our reliance on technology and that solar flare wiping out all of our tech. Sure, that's certainly a concern. But if we can unlock the keys to this unlimited energy, well, then wiping out our tech isn't that important anymore because we have the energy to kind of rebuild it. But also utilizing that extra technology power, like as you redevelop these AIs and you really make it into intelligence, being able to utilize that to answer all of these questions, solve all of these problems that are taking us decades and centuries even to answer, that allows us to become interplanetary. And I think once we reach that point, go back to what Tim mentioned before, is currency goes away, but also so does the need to work, because a lot of those processes become automated. And then the idea of life skills, going out in the woods, becomes more of an elective, something that you're interested in doing, you're interested in joining in for. And I think when you are able to do that, our species then becomes explorers again, right? Like they were many, many hundreds of years ago. We talk about on this show all the time, and I'm reluctant to say this because Tim's internet's terrible tonight and he dropped and he loves this part, but I'm going to say it anyway because it parlays in what I wanted to say. We talk about all the time the Younger Dryas period. Todd, you've been in a couple episodes and we've talked about that as well, and that reset. And I think I'm going to speak on behalf of all of us, but I think we've all sort of subscribed to the idea that there was probably some technological advancement in prehistory that was wiped out by some of these ages. And maybe that's the inherent fear for us too, is that if we go too far in technology, we'll become a footnote in history as well. And I think that's a valid concern. For me though, is that stuff's gone. So whatever strategy they took didn't work. I think we've got to get there faster. And if we can't get somebody off this planet to float in space and carry our history, then we need to figure out what we can do on this planet ourselves to kind of preserve that and etch it in stone, so to speak, but in a different way that perhaps the next generation can build on, or that we can recover from these types of cataclysmic events. Of course, there might be loss, but
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with your assessment. I just think that there's a few more things on the table that haven't been discussed. And I'm not saying, Shane, you're wrong. I think you're right, but I think you have to keep into consideration some of the other things. We're talking about a global mission, something that the human race has never operated on. I don't think we're going to be effective in space travel and stuff like that until we're physically able to mine other planets. And that could take, that itself could take 100, 200 years. You know what I mean? Yes, we're speeding up with a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of those factors that we got to get to Mars with mining equipment or Jupiter or whatever, because I don't think we're going to be able to get all the resources here. And it's kind of like we have enough to last us a while and probably get it all started. But keep in mind, as we consume those resources, we push further and further into that no return, because using gold, like the whole Anunnaki Sumerian stories, if we say it took so much gold and we expended that amount of gold and something happened, you know what I mean? Even if we go through that reset, then the next civilized group of humans, when they get to that point, are going to be short, because we already know how much it took when it went down, and now we know you're just going to be short because we burnt it all up. Does that make sense? And I'm like, and that's why I think that it's such a critical, because until we're able to measure what we're going to need and fully wrap our heads around, like a shopping list, you know what I mean? How much is this going to take? And we start talking about a global mission and the long-term survival of the human species, you know what I mean? Until that day comes, we're only speculating. But I think it's safe to say that we're still at least 100 to 200 years out, no matter how fast technology is going, until the human race starts to agree to a global mission, and we start to agree that the only way to get there is to quit fighting peace and cut back on some, animalistic instincts, these entitlements. It's just not going to happen. And I think we're still a doomed species until we address that. And it's like the hero's journey. It's even on the larger scale for us as a species. At one point, we have to grow up. You know what I mean? And I think we're getting there. But looking back, 1,000 years, we weren't there yet. I still think the human race is still in its infancy. Keep in mind the dinosaurs were around for hundreds of thousands of years. You know what I mean? But yet our history only goes back barely 10,000. You know what I mean? Whether we like it or not, we are in our infancy, and so it's like we can't. It's hard to talk about what it's going to be like in 1,000 years as us acting like mature beings and stuff, because keep in mind, a child cannot imagine what it's like to be an adult. Only adult that has experience can, and we're getting there. I think there's still hope, but it's like growing up, there's growing pains, and we'll go through them, but we got to keep the eye on the prize.
Tim, I saw you with a pencil, which is very rare for
Yes.
you to have something like that. You must have an idea that's kind of spurring there.
Well, it's funny. It's something that I thought about 6 times throughout this podcast, and I couldn't find a good way to get it in. But Todd, you mentioned it a few times. You mentioned the word ego, right? And I think that plays a huge role into our advancement, and kind of even going back to the first part of the conversation, which is moving on from a type 1 to a type 3 and eventually, 2 and eventually 3 civilization. And you can't do that with the ego, because where does the greed come from? Where does the power hungry, our reptilian brain, that's all ego, right? And so I don't think we can have any true advancements. I don't think that we can grow as human beings, as a civilization, without getting rid of the ego. And so I think one of the big ways that, or I really the only way that we can get rid of that, and this might come as a shock, because I don't think I've ever spoken about this before, but it's psychedelics. It's psychedelics, right? It's the legalization of mushrooms, of psilocybin, of LSD, of DMT, and the reason why I feel strongly about that is those powerful chemicals go a long way into melting the ego. And what's so funny is that the folks that want to keep them banned are the same people that have never tried them before and don't really understand all the good it can do. And now, granted, it's not good for everybody. I'm not telling everybody to go out there and experiment with these powerful chemicals. It's not right for everyone, and certainly not right for young people whose brains aren't developed. But I really do truly believe that psychedelics will get us to where we want to go in that regard.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. There's 1,000 things I'd like to add to that, but I won't. What I will add is keep in mind when doing such a thing. Again, we're talking about this working together concept. It's like because the psychedelics and stuff like that, they work great when you have someone guiding you, kind of like the ayahuasca and everything like that. And that group of people, their intention needs to be in a safe, agreeable, because it's still mind altering. You know what I mean? It's like, this is what we're trying to get people to, and they're willfully participating, and it's not going to deviate. The key part, it's not going to deviate from this path that we're taking you on. You know what I mean? It's one thing to be like, I'm going to get rid of the ego, and then the next thing, the guy's putting a swastika in his forehead and calling himself Manson. I mean, it's like, if you're doing it, you have to do exactly what you promised, and I think that's as long as that's being done, and that has been proven, and you got all these, whether it's scientists or spiritual guys, I think that's I agree with you, but again, it has to be guided correctly, and not some overbearing government or pharmaceutical who only wants you to buy their stuff that's mostly made from petroleum products. Taking charge of that. So, but good job, Tim. I agree. I think that that's a contributing factor for some people. I think it would help a lot of people, especially those that have been through a lot of trauma. It's easy to sit there and think that I don't need that. People don't need that. Yeah, if you've experienced no trauma, you're not really. It's easier to see clear past trauma. Trauma scrambles things and makes it hard for people to see past.
No, you're absolutely right. You need to go into it you need to go into it from a place of good, right? You need to go into it from a place of good, wanting to come out to a place that's even better with good intentions. And be willing to go on a journey of self-discovery and the willingness to want to dissolve that ego. So granted, there has to be that motivation factor, but I think the stigma that our society has against those types of chemicals really hinders us as a society from really being able to achieve some of those higher minded, more of an elevated thought process. I mean, look at the late 60s and the early 70s, man. I mean, that fucking time period. Now, granted, I'm going to contradict myself because I just said this about an hour ago that I wouldn't want to live any other place at any different time, right? But if you look at the 60s and 70s, and I'm talking about the late 60s, early 70s, I mean, the music was just so different and insane. And if you look at the way cars were designed. They were just different and out of this world and nuts. And then what happens, right? The U.S. government bans all psychedelics. They become all Schedule 1 drugs, and everything goes to fucking shit. Now, granted, I love 80s music. I don't really know why I love it so much. And I think I've talked about this before. I think it's because when, like, you're a kid and you hear the 80s music in the car, even though we were very young in the 80s and even the early 90s, we listen to some older music. I think that's why I have such an affection for 80s music. But if you compare the music in general from the late 60s, the 70s, and then the 80s, I mean, the 80s is fucking garbage. Absolute fucking garbage. So it really just stunted and halted the growth and development of imagination and ideas. And all of those people were on fucking LSD and psilocybin and
Cocaine and heroin.
Yeah. Granted, they were on some of that too. They were certainly on some of that too, right?
There's a reason the war on drugs popped around in our parents' era.
But I really strongly believe that it has done a major disservice to society.
Yeah, and it's necessary because at the end of the day, for those who have never got into the concept of removing the ego and stuff, at the end of the day, you have to process. It's a mourning. There's a death involved. It's the death of an old version of you, and the new acceptance of I'm not that person no more. You know what I mean? Would you agree with that, Tim?
No, 100%.
And for some people, it's like they struggle because I just don't ever do that. And it's like, no, the old you never did that. You know what I mean? The new you is the new you. And so, anyways, I just like to throw that little bit in. So.
Well, listen, fellas, I think we've proven time and time again that we can probably have these conversations for hours upon hours. But for the sake of our listeners, we want to keep them wanting more. So to each of you out there, we'd love to hear your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your dreams in the comments. I guess there's a lot to kind of unravel here, and I think this conversation is probably going to happen a little more deeply, if it hasn't been deep enough for you guys. But again, at another point here. But I do want to, again, extend some gratitude to you, Todd, for hopping on here again with us. We're happy to have you back every month, Todd. I mean, it's always a good conversation with you. I know we've got other strings that we can kind of pull onto in this kind of...
I think we're going to have to name you, give me a better name or something that it like Todd the Philosopher, because realistically, that's probably... I'm not saying that's what I'm, but I'm just like, that's really all I've done, and that's really the forte and the things that I do. So I don't know. Maybe we need to come up with a Todd the guest, the Todd or whatever. So
listen, we'll workshop it. I'll leave the final sign off up to you. I'm happy with Blue Shirt Guy, but that's probably trademarked by whatever company's behind that. To everyone out there watching us, especially those who trying to tune into the live stream here, sorry for the title mix up there, but we do that just when we record these. Those will come down afterwards anyway. But do like, subscribe, share. We can use it more than ever since we have confirmation from YouTube that we are shadow banned every time we mention the word cocktails as part of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Any final thoughts, my friends?
Cock motherfucking tail. That's what I got.
Todd?
I just thought the other thing that tends to get you shadow banned is me.
We're
have the two worst combinations coming together today.
6 people are going to see this whole fucking episode.
Maybe it took me hours.
But YouTube's going to be like, oh, it's that guy again. It's that guy. They're like, rip it.
I legitimately cut out 35 minutes of the Antikythera mechanism episode, which was... It wasn't the bulk. The bulk of the episode was covered, but I had to cut that out just to make it finally pass after the third time, and I was going to give up after that.
And that was a good conversation. It was all a good conversation.
We kind of teetered off as we always do, and that's what we had to cut out because some of the topics there were poo-pooed by them. But hopefully this one makes it. If you guys are watching this, that means it did, and it's coming out Thursday, so literally 2 days from when we're recording this. So if it doesn't, well, we're missing this week, and you'll maybe get it, maybe not. But until next time, everybody, raise your glass to mysteries, because this was Cocktails and Conspiracies.